Before we start, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. The crystal champagne flutes clinked together in the sunlit penthouse overlooking Manhattan's skyline. Marcus Wellington, 34 years old and worth $3 billion, raised his glass toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Central Park like a living painting. To the future of Wellington Industries and our new partnership with the Chen Corporation, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the confident timbre of someone who'd never been told no. Around the mahogany conference table sat a dozen executives in designer suits, their faces reflecting the golden afternoon light. Among them were David and Richard Chen, twin brothers who controlled the largest manufacturing empire in Southeast Asia. They smiled with the practiced ease of men who negotiated billion-dollar deals before breakfast. "We're honored, Mr. Wellington," David Chen said smoothly, adjusting his platinum cufflinks. "Your vision for expanding into Asian markets is ambitious." "Ambitious is my middle name," Marcus replied, flashing the smile that had graced the cover of Forbes 3 times. "By this time next month, Wellington Chen will be the talk of Wall Street." In the corner of the room, nearly invisible against the cream-colored walls, stood Keisha Thompson. At 42 years old, she'd spent the last 8 years cleaning this penthouse. Every surface, every corner, every trace of the excess that Marcus and his world generated daily. Keisha was a large woman, her dark skin gleaming with the perspiration that came from hours of physical labor. Her uniform, a simple gray dress with white collar, strained slightly across her generous frame. She'd learned long ago to make herself small despite her size, to become part of the furniture, to exist without taking up space. Her hands, strong and capable, held a silver tray as she moved quietly around the room, collecting empty glasses and discarded napkins. Nobody looked at her. Nobody ever looked at her. "The helicopter is ready on the roof, sir," Marcus's assistant announced. "The pilot says conditions are perfect for the flight to the Hamptons." "Excellent," Marcus said, standing. "Gentlemen, we'll celebrate properly at my beach house. The view at sunset is spectacular." "Actually," Richard Chen interjected, his accent barely noticeable, "we'll follow in our car. Some last-minute calls we need to make, but we'll meet you there within the hour." "Nah, suit yourselves," Marcus shrugged. "More champagne for me in the air." As the executives began gathering their belongings, Keisha moved closer to collect a tray of half-eaten appetizers. She was directly behind the Chen brothers when they leaned toward each other, speaking in rapid Mandarin. Keisha froze. "Ta hui si zai ji shengja shang," David whispered. "He will die in the helicopter." Richard's response was cold, calculated. "Shi de, jak xie guzhang, wan mie de yuai." Yes. Mechanical failure. A perfect accident. The tray in Keisha's hands trembled, not because she was confused or uncertain, but because she understood every single word. People saw Keisha as just a housekeeper, a large black woman good for cleaning toilets and taking out trash. What they didn't know was that Keisha Thompson had graduated summa cum laude from Columbia University with a degree in linguistics. What they didn't know was that she spoke 7 languages fluently, including Mandarin, which she'd learned during a year abroad in Beijing before her father's illness forced her back home. What they didn't know was that the simple cleaning woman could hear them plotting murder. "Tamen shenme shi hu, hui faxian?" David asked. "When will they discover it?" "Taiwanle, women jiang yi zheng zhang kong gongs," Richard replied with a quiet laugh. "Too late. We'll already control the company." Keisha's mind raced. She looked at Marcus Wellington, who was laughing at some joke, completely oblivious that the men he'd just signed a billion-dollar deal with were planning his death within the hour. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to stay quiet. She had bills to pay. Her mother's nursing home cost $8,000 a month. Her daughter was finally in community college. If she spoke up, if she caused a scene, Marcus Wellington would destroy her. Rich white men always did. But then she heard her grandmother's voice, clear as a bell in her memory. "Baby girl, silence in the face of evil makes you part of that evil. Your size, your color, your station, none of that matters when a soul needs saving." Keisha watched as Marcus headed toward the private elevator, that would take him to the rooftop helipad. The Chen brothers were packing their briefcases, smiling like sharks. She had seconds to decide. The tray slipped from her hands. The crash of silver and crystal against marble was deafening. Every head in the room turned toward her. "What the hell?" Marcus snapped, his smile vanishing. "Keisha, for God's sake! Mr. Wellington!" Keisha's voice came out louder than she'd intended, rougher. "Don't get on that helicopter!" The room went absolutely silent. Marcus stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Excuse me." Keisha's heart hammered against her ribs. She was a large woman, but in that moment she felt small, exposed, vulnerable. Still, she forced herself to move forward, to break the invisible barrier between servant and master. "Sir, please," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't get on that helicopter. It's not safe. She pointed at the Chen brothers. "They're going to kill you." The silence that followed was crushing. Then Marcus laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Kill me?" he repeated, looking around at his executives as if inviting them to share the joke. "Did you hear that? My housekeeper thinks there's a conspiracy." He looked back at Keisha with disdain. "What did you do, Keisha? Eat too many of the canapes and start hallucinating?" The words hit Keisha like physical blows. She'd expected dismissal, but not cruelty, not the casual racism masked as humor. Around the room, several executives chuckled uncomfortably. "Mr. Wellington?" She tried again. "I heard them. They spoke in Chinese. They said, 'Mr. Wellington?'" David Chen interrupted smoothly, stepping forward with an expression of concerned disgust. "Is this the type of staff you employ? Delusional workers who interrupt business meetings with paranoid fantasies?" Richard nodded, his face a mask of offense. "In our culture, such disrespect from household staff is grounds for immediate termination. Perhaps you should reconsider the quality of people you have in your home." That did it. The suggestion that his judgment was flawed, that his household wasn't perfectly managed, Marcus Wellington's ego couldn't tolerate it. "Security!" He barked into his phone. "Get up here now." "Sir, please," Keisha begged, tears beginning to form. "I'm telling you the truth. They said the helicopter would have mechanical failure. They said you'd die and they'd control the company. Please, you have to believe me." "Believe you?" Marcus's face flushed red. "You're a housekeeper, Keisha. You clean my toilets. You don't understand Chinese. You don't understand business, and you certainly don't understand your place." He grabbed her arm roughly. Keisha, despite her size, stumbled backward, her hip hitting the edge of the conference table painfully. "You're fired," Marcus hissed, "and you're lucky I don't have you arrested for whatever drugs you're obviously on." Two security guards burst through the door. They were both large men, but they grabbed Keisha's arms with unnecessary force, as if her size made her dangerous. "Get her out of here," Marcus ordered. "Make sure she never sets foot in this building again." As the guards dragged her toward the service elevator, Keisha caught one last glimpse of Marcus Wellington heading confidently toward his death, flanked by the smiling Chen brothers. "Mr. Wellington!" she screamed one final time. "Please! They're going to kill you!" The elevator doors closed. In the service corridor, Keisha sagged between the guards, sobbing. Not because she'd been fired, not because of the humiliation, but because she'd failed. She'd spoken the truth and been punished for it. And now a man was going to die. The guards shoved her toward the stairs. "Crazy woman," one muttered. "Always the big ones who lose it." Keisha stood in the concrete stairwell, water from her tears dripping onto her uniform. She could hear the distant sound of helicopter blades starting to spin on the roof above. She thought of her grandmother, who'd raised her after her mother disappeared into addiction. Her grandmother who'd worked 3 jobs to send Keisha to college, who'd told her, "Being big and black in this world means you got to work twice as hard for half as much. But don't you ever make yourself smaller than you are. You take up the space God gave you, baby." Keisha looked up at the ceiling, at the concrete separating her from the helipad. Then she looked at the wall beside her, where a red fire alarm was housed behind glass. "You think I'm crazy, Mr. Wellington?" she whispered. "Then let me show you what crazy really looks like." She smashed her elbow through the glass. The alarm exploded through the building with a violence that made her teeth ache. Seconds later, sprinkler systems throughout the entire tower erupted, drenching everything in streams of water. The guards stared at her in shock. "You activated the alarm," one shouted. "Do you know what you've done?" Keisha knew exactly what she'd done. High-rise building protocols were absolute. During an active fire alarm, all elevators locked down or descended automatically, and all aerial operations from the building were immediately prohibited. The helicopter couldn't take off. Marcus Wellington would live. He would hate her. He would probably have her prosecuted, but he would live. As the guards handcuffed her roughly, pushing her down the stairs toward the lobby where police cars were already arriving, Keisha felt a strange sense of peace. She'd lost everything, her job, probably her freedom, certainly any chance of employment in this city again. But she'd saved a life, and her grandmother would be proud. The lobby had transformed into chaos. Hundreds of employees evacuated the building, soaked by sprinklers that had turned the marble floors into treacherous pools. Fire trucks screamed to a stop outside. The private elevator finally opened, disgorging Marcus Wellington and the Chen brothers. Unlike the drenched masses, they were mostly dry, though Marcus's $5,000 suit was rumpled with fury. "I want whoever is responsible," he roared over the noise of alarms and crowd. "I want them arrested, sued, and destroyed." The head of security, a barrel-chested man named Morrison, appeared with Keisha in handcuffs. "Sir," Morrison panted, "we caught her. She broke the alarm box on the 50th floor." Marcus's eyes locked onto Keisha. Rage twisted his handsome features into something ugly. "You," he breathed, advancing on her. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me? This stunt will cost millions. Millions!" Keisha stood straight despite the handcuffs, despite being soaked through, despite every eye in the lobby watching this confrontation. She met his gaze without flinching. "I saved your life," she said quietly. "Shut up," Marcus screamed, raising his hand as if to strike her. He stopped himself, aware of the security cameras and witnesses, but his eyes promised violence. David Chen stepped forward, his mask of civility back in place. "Marcus, please, don't let this disturbed woman ruin your evening. We still have our celebration dinner. Let the police handle her." "Ooh, he's right," Richard added, already texting on his phone. "Our car is waiting. We can still make the Hamptons by dinner time." But Marcus was staring at Keisha with an expression she couldn't read. The fury was still there, but something else lurked beneath it. A flicker of doubt. "You said you heard them speaking Chinese," he said slowly. "You claim they're trying to kill me." "I don't claim, sir," Keisha replied, her voice steady despite her shaking. "I know. I heard them." "That's absurd," David scoffed. "She doesn't speak Chinese. Look at her, she's a cleaning woman. So because I'm black and fat and clean houses, I can't be educated?" Keisha's voice rose. "Is that what you think?" The directness of her question silenced several nearby observers. Even Marcus looked taken aback. "I graduated from Columbia University," Keisha continued, her voice gaining strength. "Summa cum laude. I speak 7 languages, including Mandarin, which I learned during a year in Beijing. I understand every word they said." She turned to face the Chen brothers directly, and in perfect Mandarin said, "Nimen renwei mayu ren, neng tang dong nimen, dan shi wo teng jian le." "You thought no one could understand you, but I heard." The effect was instantaneous. Both brothers' faces drained of color. David took an involuntary step backward. Richard's hand, still holding his phone, began to shake. Marcus saw it, saw the fear, the recognition, the momentary loss of composure. "What did you just say?" he asked Keisha, his voice barely a whisper. "I told them that they thought no one could understand them," Keisha translated. "But I heard everything." She looked directly at David Chen. "Ta hui si zai zi sheng shang." She repeated his exact words. "He will die in the helicopter." David's face went from pale to gray. Marcus turned slowly to face his new business partners. "Is that what you said?" His voice was deadly quiet. "Did you discuss my death in a language you thought no one here could understand?" "She's lying," Richard burst out, his composure finally cracking. "She's making up sounds. This is corporate espionage. She's been paid by your competitors to sabotage this deal." Sabotage? Marcus's business instincts, sharp as razors, were fully engaged now. "If she wanted to sabotage me, She'd have let me get on the helicopter. Your logic doesn't work, gentlemen. The helicopter is perfectly safe, David insisted, but sweat was beading on his forehead. This is all paranoid delusion. Marcus pulled out his phone and typed rapidly. Then you won't mind if I have my mechanics do a full inspection right now, specifically of any potential mechanical failures that might cause an accident. The tension in David's shoulders was visible to everyone nearby. Richard's hand, still clutching his phone, had formed into a white-knuckled fist. This is insulting, Richard said stiffly. We're leaving. We'll discuss the status of this partnership with our lawyers. Stay, Marcus commanded. It wasn't a request. I'm suddenly very curious about what my head mechanic will find. For 5 minutes, they stood in the evacuating lobby. Marcus Wellington, the Chen brothers, and Keisha Thompson in handcuffs. Around them, employees streamed past. Firefighters checked for actual flames, and water continued to drip from the ceiling. Marcus's phone rang. He answered immediately, his eyes never leaving the Chen brothers' faces. Sir, the mechanic's voice was shaken, audible even to those standing close. You need to see this. The main rotor assembly has been tampered with. The hydraulic system, Jesus, sir, if you'd taken off, you wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes. The entire system would have failed. This is deliberate sabotage, Mr. Wellington. This is attempted murder. The phone nearly slipped from Marcus's hand. He stared at the Chen brothers, who were already backing toward the exit. Officers, Marcus shouted to the NYPD personnel who'd responded to the alarm. Arrest those 2 men, now! What happened next was chaos. David Chen pulled a gun, small, silver, probably backup for whatever plan B they'd had in place. Someone screamed. Marcus dove sideways. And Keisha Thompson, despite being in handcuffs, despite being exhausted and soaked and terrified, dropped her shoulder and charged. All 240 pounds of her hit David Chen like a linebacker. The gun went flying, skittering across the wet marble. Richard tried to run but slipped on the water, went down hard. Within seconds, police had both brothers face down on the floor, being handcuffed and read their rights. Marcus Wellington slowly got to his feet, staring at Keisha, who was being helped up by a police officer who was gently removing her handcuffs. Ma'am, the officer said quietly, you just saved this man's life. Twice. Keisha looked at Marcus. Their eyes met across the flooded lobby. She waited for the apology, for the gratitude, for some acknowledgement of what she'd done and what he'd said to her. Instead, Marcus turned and walked away to give his statement to the police. Keisha sat in the police station for 6 hours. They took her statement, verified her story, praised her courage, and then nothing. No charges, but also no apology from Wellington Industries. No acknowledgement at all. At midnight, they released her. She walked out into the Manhattan night with no job, no prospects, and a phone full of missed calls from her daughter asking what was wrong. She was fishing her Metro card out of her purse when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Marcus Wellington sat in the back seat. Get in, he said. No, thank you, Mr. Wellington. Keisha kept walking. Please. The word sounded like it cost him. Please get in the car, Ms. Thompson. Something in his voice made her stop. She looked at him, really looked at him. He looked smaller somehow, less polished, human. Against her better judgment, she got in the car. They drove in silence for several blocks. Finally, Marcus spoke. The Chen brothers have confessed to everything. Attempted murder, fraud, industrial espionage. They're looking at life in prison. Good, Keisha said flatly. More silence. You could have let me die, Marcus said quietly. After the way I treated you. After the things I said. You could have walked away. Yes, Keisha agreed. I could have. Why didn't you? Keisha looked out the window at the passing lights of the city. My grandmother raised me after my mother got sick. She worked herself into an early grave to give me opportunities. She told me that being a large black woman in this world meant I'd always be underestimated, always be invisible to people like you. But she also told me that my worth wasn't determined by other people's blindness. She turned to look at Marcus directly. You were cruel to me today, Mr. Wellington. You dismissed me, humiliated me, and fired me for trying to help you. But your life still had value. and I wasn't going to let you die just because you couldn't see mine." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I've spent my entire life believing that money and power made me superior, that people who served me were somehow less intelligent, less valuable, less human." He looked at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Keisha, I'm so deeply sorry for every word, every assumption, every moment of disrespect. You are extraordinary, and I was too blind to see it." Keisha felt her own eyes burning. "Thank you," she whispered. "I want to offer you a position," Marcus said. "Not as my housekeeper, as my Director of International Relations and Cultural Affairs. Full executive salary, benefits, and I'll fund completion of any advanced degrees you want to pursue. I need someone who can see what I miss, who can hear what I can't, who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being an arrogant fool." Keisha was silent, studying him. "I'm also establishing the Thompson Foundation," he continued. $50 million to start, dedicated to providing educational opportunities for service workers. Because how many Keisha Thompsons are out there? Brilliant and talented, forced into invisible jobs because of circumstances. "You don't have to do this," Keisha said softly. "Yes, I do," Marcus replied firmly. "Because today I learned that the most valuable person in my entire company was the one I never bothered to look at. And I can't change the past, but I can damn sure change the future." Keisha looked at this man, this flawed, humbled human man, and thought of her grandmother, thought of all the invisible people keeping the world running while people like Marcus Wellington took credit. "I'll accept," she said finally, "on one condition. Anything. You treat every person who works for you, every janitor, every security guard, every person you've been trained to look through, with the same respect you'd give your board members. You see them, Mr. Wellington. You learn their names, their stories, their dreams. Because I'm not the only invisible one, I'm just the one who got lucky." Marcus extended his hand. "You have my word." Keisha shook it. His grip was firm, warm, human. 6 months later, the New York Times Sunday edition featured a profile titled, "The Housekeeper Who Saved a Billionaire and Changed Corporate America." Keisha Thompson sat in her corner office at Wellington Industries, reviewing a contract written in Japanese for a new partnership. Outside her window, Manhattan gleamed in the morning sun. Her mother was in the best care facility in the state. Her daughter was transferring to Columbia on a full Wellington Foundation scholarship, and Keisha herself was enrolled in a PhD program in international relations. But more than that, much more than that, she was visible. Every Thursday, she held open office hours where any Wellington Industries employee, from the CEO to the newest janitor, could come talk to her about anything. The company had instituted mandatory cultural sensitivity training, fair wage policies, and educational assistance programs. Marcus Wellington, for his part, had become a different kind of leader. Not perfect. He was still learning, still stumbling, but present, human, real. On her desk, Keisha kept a photo of her grandmother. Next to it was a framed quote she'd written herself. "Your worth is not determined by whether others see you. It's determined by whether you see yourself, and whether you have the courage to make others look." Her phone buzzed. Marcus, asking if she'd reviewed the Beijing proposal. Keisha smiled and picked up the phone. "Yes, sir, and I have some thoughts you need to hear." She'd found her voice, and she was never going to let herself be invisible again. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe for more.